Welcome back, everyone. And if you have not followed us on social media, please do so at MercyCast almost everywhere, but Facebook, which is just at MercyCast. It really helps when you follow us, you repost what we post, and you let your friends know about this podcast. Thank you so much, really, for joining in on what we're doing here and telling these stories of learning compassion through adversity. Because I think at the end of the day, so much of life can be bound up in it. And we're here to show you that God is doing something new through the pain that you're feeling. With that said, let's dive in. Welcome to the MercyCast, where we are learning the art of compassion through the adversity of life. I am your host, Raleigh Sadler. Today, I want to talk about when the pain doesn't go away, when it starts to feel chronic, when you think that the light is finally going to shine in and the darkness is going to flee, but it doesn't. There are many of us who just don't feel like we can get a break. I remember when I lived in New York City, I broke my foot, and I broke it bad. It was in a really weird surfing accident in Florida. My foot swelled up. It didn't heal right. Years later, I would be in New York, and I'd be walking thinking it had healed, only to have it break again just from walking. 6 months later, I get out of the boot. I'm excited. Then my other foot breaks. So I spent a year in a boot in New York in constant pain, and it started to get better. But that's not the case for most of us. A lot of us live with chronic pain, especially the older we get. We want it to go away, and sometimes we don't even understand why it's there. Valerie has had 16 orthopedic surgeries and has chronic pain. Today, I am talking with Valerie Althouse. She is the Director of Training for International Students Incorporated. Valerie, welcome to the MercyCast.
Thanks, Raleigh. It's good to be with you.
So I've known Valerie since the early days. I met you shortly after I moved to New York. And how long have you been in New York City?
It is over 18 years now.
That's intense because I've known you this long and I did not know your story, really. I didn't know that you were living with chronic pain. I know a lot of people, if we're in pain, everyone knows. But for some reason, you're able to keep that at bay. What does that journey look like for you?
Oh, so many questions and one question right there.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I can tell a little bit of the why of my story, and then, we can get into what that looks like. So starting in my early 20s, I started having some trouble in like this joint or that joint, just usual like, hey, I think I tore a meniscus, pretty normal stuff. And then I had a foot surgery, and just slowly it just seemed like there was always something going wrong in one joint or another. And years and years of that happening, you just add one on top of another. And kind of like you said, you always think the next one's going to fix everything and I'm going to get out of this. But it just continues. And it's some combination for me of having some joint hypermobility and arthritis in my family. And it's just a really bad recipe. The joints are getting a lot of wear and tear, and that means they hurt and injure easily. So, me playing dodgeball is a dangerous thing. You don't want to see that.
So this is genetic. This is something that's been in your family. This is something you've experienced for a long time. And it has kept you from doing things like playing dodgeball. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've been there a little bit too. But at some point for me, it's like I've had these things that have kind of just, my grandparents had them, my parents had them, now I have them. And then sometimes I live thinking that everyone is dealing with this, but that's not always the case. Have you come to a point where you've had to process that and you're like, oh, it's not normal to live with chronic pain, or it's not everyone's experience. How about that? That's a better way to say it. It's not everyone's experience to live with chronic pain.
Yeah, sure. I've had to process a lot of things a lot of times. We could say it that way, since this has gone on for quite a long time in my life. And, you always think you're going to get ahead of it. I'm pretty motivated to try to get past it, but it always seems to still catch me. So, yeah, I can't say I've ever been the most athletic person as it is. So thank goodness my hobby is in music. That's a little safer, generally speaking. But I love hiking, for example, and I have not been able to go hiking for many years now. It's my recovery goal right now, but it does hold me back. I love walking and doing other things for exercise, strength training, and there's just certain things, like I'm in a season right now where I can't do as much as I want to. Walking hurts right now, so I have to limit that. I have to take inventory, if you will. Is this a good day? Is this a bad day? And have grace with myself, and try to do all the right things physical therapy wise. But I can tell you, it gets old. It gets really old. I've definitely had some days where I feel like I'm getting ahead of it. And then there's days where you're not motivated at all to work hard to try to climb out of that pit once again. It can really, it can be a heavy thing on top of regular life that we're all having to carry.
Tell me more about this idea of taking inventory of the good and the bad each day. Because sometimes I think pain can be so blinding that we can think nothing of anything else. It's just the pain. It's just like there's nothing else to see. How do you stop? How do you pause and take inventory of what's happening?
Yeah, when I've shared my story before, I've talked about some of the practices that I keep in my life, kind of partnered with this chronic pain and chronic health challenges. So one of those is, even in a daily time with God, which I hope most of us have. If we're believers, we're trying to walk with God, we want to stay connected with Him. But I watch for, a lack of a better term would be like, what are my indicator lights saying, right? What are the lights on the dashboard saying? Sometimes when I go through a day and I'm just trying to handle life, ministry, errands, etc., I can find myself getting like irritable or angry or something, like, why? Nothing really particularly bad happened today. And then I have to check in and go, oh, I'm in pain. And it's so much on the back burner for me. And it's kind of a normal feeling that it doesn't always even register. And once I can pay attention to it and, name it, it helps me go, okay, I need to pull back. What does grace look like for today? Maybe I slow down. Maybe I need to spend some time with God lamenting that. Maybe I just need some ice packs and a nap, and that can do great, right? So
Yeah.
checking in with myself, what's going on? What am I feeling? And responding to that has been one of my tools and practices.
Counselors will call this idea connection and redirection. So connecting with what's happening right now. And in that connection, there's this idea of acceptance. Like right now, I'm accepting that I hurt, or I'm
Mhm.
accepting that I'm frustrated, or I'm accepting that I'm sad. This is just where I'm at. But the redirection is it can be like a replacement where we say, okay, so instead of going to my old coping skill, which could be blowing up and being angry, it could be just binge watching TV, it could be overeating, it could be,
Mhm.
there's a million negative things that we could do. But instead of that, I've caught it. I've connected with what's going on. And in that connection, you might want to connect with God and say, God, help me. But
Mhm.
in that redirection, you're like, okay, what can I do instead? So I'm feeling sad. What do I do next? And I think bringing that level of consciousness to our pain, it can help. And it feels like a muscle that has to grow, because it's like you do it a couple of times and you feel great about it. But then
Mhm.
the pain comes back worse than ever. And you're just like, all is lost. All is lost. There's no way I'm getting through this. How, what, no. And then but it's that simple practice of connection and redirection, like you said. And I also like how you mentioned having that daily time with the Lord, because that is, in a sense, how we are connecting with God. And
Mhm.
that can, in a sense, disrupt the patterns in our lives. Because pain's coming either way. Pain will come. How can we be preemptive and proactive when it comes to our pain? What do you think about that? Like, what does being preemptive and proactive look like when you're dealing with chronic pain?
Mm. I guess there's a couple of things there, maybe in a very, very, very practical level for me is I don't waste a minute making doctor appointments or physical therapy appointments. Like I am on it. If something starts to hurt, I am on the phone. I've got a great pain management doctor. Like, hey, can I get that injection? Could we get that really soon, please? Because I'm dying over here. Having a good team around me has been really helpful. Having a primary care doctor that understands my story and has been supportive and helping me figure things out. So that part, definitely. I'd say, though, being preemptive, there's definitely times where my personality is I'm going to push ahead and I'm going to push through. I'm always generally going to err on the side of powering through instead of slowing down to notice and to feel and to take stock of what's, hurting or what I need to do. So I've certainly also found that a preemptive tool for me is having good friends that check in on how I'm feeling, or me initiating with a really good friend and just saying, hey, it's a rough day. Can I just complain for 10 minutes right now? Like, can I just whine a bit? And they're so gracious and just letting me talk for a while because the emotion and the struggle and the frustration just builds up and needs to get released sometimes.
And you bring up a good point about having a team around you, not just medical professionals, but also a team or a community of friends, mentors, guides who they are focused on you. I was talking to someone recently in the UK, and as we were talking about just going through difficult times, they said, well, you got to have a team around you. And I think that's so important because we don't think like that. And yes, we could see our church kind of as a team, but what I've found is finding those people that are safe people, that are close friends, bringing them around and really letting them tend to you. Because what a lot of people don't catch about self care is sometimes self care is less about what you do and more about what you allow into your life. And so allowing people to tend to you, allowing people to care for you, being vulnerable enough to release things and say, I can't do this on my own. Can you hold me accountable to this? Or can we meet weekly about that? Or if this comes up, can I call you and you just talk me down?
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
would you encourage people to develop teams to care for them?
A phrase that jumped into my mind as you were talking is that one of the most powerful things we can say is, I need help, is to reach out and ask for that kind of support. It's probably one of the most mature statements we can say, even though many people would feel, oh, it's a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength, maturity, and insight. So I'd say I know at least in my story, I keep an eye open for those that aren't trying to fix my situation. Believe me, I've tried everything and done every test. They're trying to understand and be supportive and compassionate rather than fixing. I keep an eye out for those where we just have a shared love of some hobby or thing that redirects my attention away from, yeah, this is a hard day, but instead I'm going to go hang out with my friend and talk about Broadway music, right? Because it gets my mind going in another direction. So that's definitely been a help.
So finding people who are safe, who seek to understand rather than to fix, and then some people
Hmm.
who may have a shared affinity to where that can redirect you. And so instantly we're back to that idea of connecting and redirecting, but then
Hmm.
finding a team. So we can do that individually, but finding a team that helps us do that. So the people who understand, they're connecting with you. They are listening. They want to know more about what's going on. And sometimes I've found that you just need one of those friends who maybe your friendship isn't as deep as other friends, but they're always down for a good time. If you call them and
Mm.
you're like, hey, let's go to this baseball game in the next 20 minutes. And they're like, I got the car. Meet me there. Or
Yeah.
they're always down for a good time. I think those people can be helpful, especially in those moments where we're out of our gourd and we're struggling and we don't know how to change our situation. I think sometimes when you can't change your situation, you can change your location. And having those friends, having
Yeah.
those friends in our lives who can be like, yes. And so yeah, I love how you talk about the people who seek to understand, but also affinity based friendships that can help you as you're developing a team to put around you to help you navigate your pain journey.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think it's so important to keep a hobby alive. And, I work in full time ministry. I am up to my ears in responsibilities and people and issues I got to deal with. And, just having a hobby, I sing in a group in New York. And so just going to a rehearsal on Monday night, I know there's no time and space in my brain to think about work and ministry while I'm trying to sight read music, right? Or we're doing something, a really fun song where I'm literally playing a tambourine. Like, you just can't
A
focus
tambourine.
on ministry or pain when you're singing like some crazy gospel song. So, yeah.
And so, what do you think is the secret sauce behind that? Because the older I get, the more I hear people say things like, you should have hobbies. Don't work all the time. Have hobbies. Do this, do that. It's like everyone seems to be, and I do. I have hobbies. There are things that I like to do. One of them is, and people don't understand this, but I like to walk long distances.
Mhm.
Love walking. I think walking is great. Running's fine. I'd never poo-poo that. If you like running, great. But for some reason, for me, walking, it slows everything down. It helps me process the day, helps me process where I am. And sometimes I'm not even thinking about anything, but it's
Mhm.
a physical way that I can engage the world that's low intensity. But for me, I love it. And I think I got used to walking in New York, which made it really hard when I couldn't walk for a year. It's like
Yeah.
that took away one of my favorite hobbies. And so, yeah, how would you help people identify their hobbies? Because I know you've worked with people as a guide as people are trying to grow in their leadership skills and trying to refine their visions. How would you encourage someone that you'd be working with to find the right hobby that suits them?
I'd say don't overthink it. Whatever makes you smile and laugh or whatever
I
quiets
like
your
that.
mind. I occasionally paint furniture. I'm not great at it, but I like redoing old pieces for my apartment. So when I do that, physical labor instead of mind labor or relational work, that's restorative and I enjoy a finished result. Something where you actually can see a finished result sometimes when you work in ministry and you don't see finish as easily, right? So looking for things that just remind you that you're a human being and it's okay to be a human being and enjoy baseball, golf, music, learning the cajon, which was one of my goals. So, you know, doing anything that just gets you out of your head, really.
I agree. And I mean, I'm not sure about the cajon, even though I know what a cajon is. And so if you don't know what a cajon is, please, you can reach out to Valerie Althouse through the show notes, and she'll be glad to tell you about her hobby. And maybe it becomes your hobby. But yeah, I love that definition. Don't overthink it and find what gets you out of your head because that's how walking has been for me. And you would think, okay, what are you just going to do? Walk around your block? And I'm like, well, that hobby went from walking 10 miles a day to now I go to different places and hike and I'll walk around northern Spain on different pilgrimages and such. And just kind of finding other people who are walkers as well has been amazing because then you're connecting with people who have that shared love. And now my circle is growing because I'm finding people who do share that affinity.
Mm.
And that's been helpful for me. And so you've been living with this chronic pain for a long time. Like right now, you've even mentioned that it's hard to walk. And so, other than connecting with your friends and connecting with your hobbies, what have you been doing to manage what you're experiencing right now?
Yeah, it's like so right now you're catching me where I'm just about 6 weeks out from the last surgery that I had. Walking hurts right now because I'm recovering from that one. It'll so I'm in physical therapy on a regular basis, and I also use or have owned at one point every home-based pain management tool you can imagine from, massage guns to TENS units, like so I
Wow.
definitely have my tricks of the trade to, if I wake up at 2 in the morning and I'm like, oh, my hip hurts again, I can kind of reach for something or, grab a heating pad or something. And I can get back to sleep again. But, I guess that maybe the more important thing I'd want to share is that I think the posture towards pain internally has been more important than even just the management of pain. Because I can come up with all kinds of strategies to like, build endurance or make sure I bring certain things along that I'm going to need. I hope I can go hiking and long distance walking again in the future. But I've had to come to a place of some deep acceptance of this as the kind of upside down gift, if you will, in my life of how God has used it with others in ministry and in my own formation.
And so, tell me more about this internal focus because you're right. We have talked about the external and different things you can do, but tell me more about the internal work.
So I do have a favorite book, so I'll do a shameless plug for that one. Years ago, someone heard this author speak at a conference and recommended it to me. And it's called The Uninvited Companion by Scott Sham. And he shares his own story of going from being a triathlete level person of health to dealing with debilitating fatigue that really changed his whole life. And I resonated with his story, but I resonated especially with his wrestling. And he at one point highlights how, God doesn't typically answer our question as to why, right? I've chased that question down thoroughly and haven't really come up with an answer that is truly satisfying. But he talks about a different question of saying, how do I live this life? Okay, so I've been given something I don't want. And despite all of the prayers for healing and the doctor visits, I am not yet free from it. So, how do I walk through this in a way that it's used for something that's even that has a greater purpose than maybe I would have chosen for myself?
And so, when you shift from the word why to how,
Hmm.
now you're looking for, in a sense, a way to reframe it, maybe? Like, what
Mhm.
does this look like in my daily life? Because I'm done saying, God, why did you allow this to happen? And why is this just happening to me? And da 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 da. You're saying, okay, it's here. You're recognizing it. And you're saying, okay, how should this look? What's next?
Mhm.
And so, what does that look like practically for you?
I guess I would say I just immediately think of conversations that I have with students. I work in an organization that works among international students, so those that are from all different country backgrounds and different religions. And everyone has this, well, if God likes you, then surely he blesses you, right? Like he gives you good things and he would never give you something bad. So when I share my story of pain, first of all, it crosses cultures. So no matter what culture you're from, even though I consider myself a fairly privileged American, if you will, uh, to go through physical pain crosses over all kinds of religious, cultural barriers to say this is something everyone walks through. And then to talk about how it's deepened and shaped me, I'll say, like, I think about having conversations with students that are from all different religious backgrounds, and we're talking about how God has used pain in my life to deepen, to mature, to teach endurance and perseverance, to build character, to really act as a bridge of being able to say, I don't follow Jesus because he makes my life perfect. I follow Jesus because he gives me hope in the middle of some things that are messy and don't get easily fixed. And I can speak from that place into other students' lives or other people's lives who are walking through pain, whether that's physical or emotional or anything. I can say, I've sat there, I've been there, and Jesus is still enough. So I think that's where I've landed is the how do I use this for speaking of his glory? How do I use this in a way that touches other people's lives? Because he's met me in the middle of some messy, hard places and shaped me. And I'm okay to live there and share that with other people.
And I like how you say that our stories can connect across cultures and how we can share what we've been through with other people. Because now you're talking like a guide. Now you're saying, hey, I've been there and I know that you may be there right now and you're not seeing anything that gives you any hope. You don't think you're going to get through this, but I have been there. I'm here to say that you can keep going. You do
Mhm.
not have to give up, even though the pain is blinding, even though it doesn't make sense, even though you have a million questions as to why this has happened.
Mhm.
How should we move forward now? And
Mhm.
and let my life be an example for you. I mean, that's the reason I started this podcast, because at the end of the day, I realized that people, when we hear stories of other people who've gone through hard things and come out the other side, or have harnessed what they've learned, even if they didn't come out of the hard times, even if they're still there is something redemptive to those stories. And they encourage us when we listen to them. And I love how you're able to share your story in a way that benefits others. Valerie, how would you encourage our listeners who they're dealing with their own chronic pain? How could you encourage them as someone who's been there?
Boy, there's so many things to say, but I guess I always want to start with saying it's okay to start with where you are, right? To say it's okay to stop, slow down, acknowledge what hurts, acknowledge its impact on you, and to grieve it too. To grieve my ideal athletic self for the reality that I'm not quite back yet to what I would like to do. And,
Right.
name those things that disappoint you and you don't have right now. But then there's a holding on, at least in my Christian faith, of saying, right now, there's an assignment that I've been given that is an honor and a beautiful thing to speak of how Jesus is enough for me in the middle of this pain. And I get to enjoy, sharing him with others through that story. It actually becomes a bridge. That to me brings a lot of joy. I think there's ways that even in my story, joy comes out of it because I get to share that with other people. And then it still marries me to eternity. Like I'd say it still always comes back to, I think it's Randy Alcorn uses that expression that eternity is like a line that goes in either direction forever and ever. And my life is this little dot, right? And it doesn't mean that it's insignificant or unimportant what I struggle with, but it does remind me that in the larger scope, when it says that our glories, our reward is beyond compare to what we suffer. If my suffering feels really, really big, but in the grand scheme of things looks much smaller, it renews my own perspective. I don't have to minimize, but I can look at it with a different set of lenses to say, it is okay. He will redeem it. He will use it. And it's not forever. It's truly not forever. So that gives me a lot of hope.
And I love how you've mentioned that it marries you to eternity. I think that's such a beautiful picture
Mm,
and how, yes, our lives are a blip. They may feel, though, when we're in pain, that
mhm,
it's taking forever, but that idea of eternity does give us perspective.
mhm.
And and I think perspective is something that you've given us a lot of in this conversation. And so, Valerie, thank you so much for being a part of the Mercy Cast today.
Thank you for having me. This was a good refresher, even for me, to look back and remember all that God has done.